So this is the Premier League table after 3 games in. You might be asking, where's Manchester City? Well, this is just the top half. This is the bottom half of the table as well. Now we're only 3 games in, but another thing that's happened since I did my last Premier League predictions a few weeks ago is the transfer window was closed. There's been a crazy ending to the transfer window. So I thought, you know what? It's international break. Don't have any video ideas, but I feel like after watching 3 games, after seeing the transfer window unfold, my Premier League predictions have changed. So I want to break down each team, my general thoughts of them after 3 games. I've got a slide on each of the teams in order from 20th to 1st, and I'm going to give you my new Premier League predictions, starting with Burnley because that's 20th and it's still Burnley. I predicted them 20th about a month ago. And look, they got a win versus Sunderland. Look, they could have maybe got a result versus Manchester United if VAR had benefited them more, potentially, if it was on their side. But Man United should have been 3-4 up at half time. They were not good, Burnley, in that first half versus Man United. They were not good in that second half versus Spurs. And I just think out of all the teams, they have the least amount of quality. I also will note that normally when I write my slides, I get AI to proofread them and do the grammar up and everything like that. I haven't done that. So if there's spelling errors, grammar errors, anything that just looks a bit of a mess, I apologise. But these are my notes. So Lara Foster impressed me in the Man United game. I thought Burnley were weirdly clinical. And I like the signing of Leslie Okachukwu. He looks like a very good midfielder. I like a couple of Burnley players. I think Marcus Edwards could bring something. I'm interested to see what he does. Tuanzebe, big fan. Mejbri, obviously Man United links. I just feel like Burnley, when I look at their best starting 11, I think it's the weakest in the Premier League. And I just don't think they have enough players that are Premier League quality. I can look at another side like Sunderland and be like, well, Granit Xhaka, obviously the level. Enzo Laffi, obviously Premier League level. Look at Gertruda, they just signed Premier League level. I don't feel that as much with Burnley. Like, they've got some good players, but there's not many players I look at Burnley and I go, he's a Premier League level player. 19th have gone with Brentford. Now, I know that they've got a 1-0 win this season, but they weren't great. They weren't great. Despite winning one game this season, they've not looked great. Sharda is a player I rate. Don't think he's been amazing. Look, they lost Norgard, Visser, and Bumo, and Thomas Frank. And if you look at the sales, then Brentford's transfer window has been amazing in terms of sales and outgoings. If we look at the incomings, it's not been good enough. I don't think they've done enough to improve their starting 11, especially when they've lost such an influential figure in Thomas Frank. Damsgaard's a good player. Nathan Collins is one of the most underrated players in the Premier League. Ouattara, overpaid for him a little bit, but I think it's a good signing. Coyote looked really good back in the last season. I remember playing against him, and he was really good in the Man United game. Kelleher is a solid keeper. Thiago's got a lot to bring, but Norgard and Visser have not been replaced. I'm just not sure about the Brentford coach yet and what he's going to bring. I think they're probably going to go down, even though I do think they have some good quality players. I'm just not fully convinced when I have watched them. I know they've won one game. I'm not convinced. And in 18th, I've got Leeds. Now, don't get me wrong. 4 points on the table for Leeds is very good. Like, win versus Everton, very good result. Draw versus Newcastle, very good result. And I do think defensively, Leeds are a decent side. And look, the game they lost as Arsenal, you'd expect them to lose that game. Maybe defence can keep you. I think the weirdest way, if you're a promoted team, to stay up is to have a good defence, but you also need an attack that's capable of scoring goals. I just don't know. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's injury prone. I don't know about their attacking options. Like, don't get me wrong. They've looked better than West Ham. They've looked better than Wolves. They've looked better than Brentford in these opening games. Don't get me wrong. They've looked better than Villa in these opening games. But I just look at the attack and I look at the squad and I look at the manager and I'm just not fully convinced. I think they've started well. But look, Anton Stach. I did a video speaking about Anton Stach about a year and a half ago. Player I rate, player that's looking good for Leeds. He would be the difference maker. Going into Wolves in 17th. Now, have Leeds look better than Wolves? Yes. But do I think Wolves have a better squad? Yes. Do I think Wolves have a better manager? Yes. And do I think Wolves, if they look like they're going to go down, will probably spend big in January? Yes. One thing about Wolves' ownership is if it looks like they're going to go down, they do get their wallets out in January because they don't want to go down. Strand Larson staying is a good thing. Having a good manager is a good thing. I think João Gomez and Andre is actually one of the best midfields in the Premier League, but it lacks depth. They've got like 4 options in midfield to cover the whole midfield for the season. But João Gomez and Andre, very good players. I just think injuries there could be an issue. Arias looked good in that preseason game, but it depends how he does, how he settles in the league. It depends on new signings that Arias do, because Cunha's not an easy player to replace. They did bring in a player, I forgot his name. Who's the player you just brought in towards the end, the attacker? Mine's gone blank. Ain't and Semedo. Have I spelled Semedo wrong? I don't know. Both left, both decent fullbacks. I like Agbadu. He's coming obviously earlier in the year. I like him and the influence that he's having. I think he's a good addition, and I felt that Wolves ended last season better. So, with the basis of, I know Wolves have 0 points and they're the bottom of the league, that they were this time last year as well. I think Wolves have actually looked better in their games than some of the other teams, but they are rock bottom. Now, I don't think Wolves will look great. I think they've been like the 3rd worst team or the 4th worst team, but not the worst team. Just on the eye from what I've watched. My stepdad's a Wolves fan, so I do watch a little bit of them. So I think that they will stay up. I think they will stay up. I think their manager is good. I think they ended last season well. I think they have the quality to stay up. Going into 16th, and I feel like a lot of people would have put them in the relegation zone and been reactionary, because the first 2 games of the season they were appalling. But it's West Ham. There was a part of me that almost put them in the relegation zone, but I just felt that I looked at West Ham's squad, I looked at Leeds' squad, and I was like, and I looked at West Ham's game versus Nottingham Forest, and I said, I think it's just that reactionary. I remember Ten Hag lost the first 2 games of the season at Man United, 2-1 to Brighton or 3-1 to Brighton, put me, and then 4-0 to Brentford. And I remember everyone thinking Man United is screwed. And then we ended up coming 3rd that season and winning the Carabao Cup under Ten Hag. So I feel like you've got to remember like little things like that. Now, Graham Potter, his first full seasons, had a window. Don't think West Ham have done enough in the window, but I do think Matheus Fernandes is a really good signing. I think that obviously Paquetá could be just a new player with this scandal behind him. Bowen is one of the best players in the Premier League. While I don't rate West Ham striker options, they've got one of the best players in the Premier League in Bowen. Matheus Fernandes was Southampton's best player. Diblin got a lot of the talk, but he was easily Southampton's best player. You know that Paquetá, there's a quality player there. Wan-Bissaka's a good player, signed a good keeper. Todibo, I think, has a lot more to offer. So look, I've always liked Potter, but he doesn't fill me with confidence. I think he's not adapted since his Brighton days. But I think the West Ham squad is too good to go down. I just do think it is too good to go down. And I just think Bowen is just a different level of quality. So 15th, I've gone with Sunderland. Now, this was a big change because I predicted them to come 18th, because I just predicted that all the promoter clubs would go down. But then Sunderland did a lot of business, particularly in defence. This was before they got Mukiele in. This is before they got Gertrude in. And I said my concern with Sunderland is their defence good enough. I think Dan Ballard is one of the best centre-backs to be playing in the Championship last year, if not the best centre-back in the Championship last year. And again, I've not watched loads of Southampton Championship last year, but from what I watched, I rate him. But look, they've got really good young talents in Chris Rigg. They've got Enzo Lafi and Xhaka, that Premier League level players, and they've won 2 out of 3 early. Getting 2 wins out of 3 is something the relegated teams of last season would struggle to do. Ipswich got a few wins here and there, but not 2 wins in 3 games. To get 6 points in such a short period of time is key for staying up. They've got a very good manager in Libris. They've got some very good summer signings. I think they've done the most business out of all the things. And I think out of this, when I look at their squad, it's actually pretty good. And it's actually pretty stacked. 14th might be harsh. Now, they could have been 10th, they could have been 11th, they could have been 12th, they could have been 14th. 14th to 10th was difficult. And the reason I put them in 14th is because I don't know how they're going to do with the demands of playing midweek in Europe. And they were actually, for the last half of the season, were on track to finish 8th, and they are currently 8th right now in the league. So this may seem harsh, but it's Crystal Palace. I rate Glasner. I think Munoz, Sarr, Wharton, Gay, Lacroix, Mateta, all good players. They didn't lose Gay, big tick. Glasner stays, big tick. Good team, big tick. Dean Henderson, maybe 14th is harsh. I just think being in the Conference League, I think just that might impact them with depth if they get a few injuries. I just don't know if they've done enough in the transfer window. Eze's a big loss. I don't know if they've done enough in transfer window, but then I'm also like, am I being harsh? Because Wharton, Munoz, Sarr, Lacroix, Gay, Mateta, all really good players. I think that Palace are better than Fulham. I think Palace are better than Fulham, but I think Fulham will finish above them because they're not in Europe. Like, I think Palace are better than Fulham, but Fulham may be more stable because they're not in Europe. Which brings me to Fulham. Solid side. Some people might argue 13th does them dirty because I know they've only got 2 points on the board, but they've looked really good in the opening games versus Brighton, Man United, and Chelsea. The second half versus Man United, they were incredible. The first half versus Chelsea, they should have been 1-0 up. VAR did them dirty, and I think they could have been on 5 or 3 points after 3 very difficult fixtures. I think Marco Silva's good. I think Munoz and Rao are very good striker options. Josh King looks promising. Anderson, Burge, Iwobi, Robinson, Smith Rowe. I actually predicted Fulham, I think 15th originally, and they've gone to 13th, even though they didn't do a lot of business. Because I'm like, actually, they just have a well-rounded squad and they're going to be playing 1 game a week and a good manager. I just feel like that they're just very solid there. And 12th, and a lot of people have put them higher, but I don't think they'll finish higher than 12th, to be honest, even though I rated Iriola, it's Bournemouth. Now, a lot of people have been overreactionary about Bournemouth losing their defenders. And I think defensively they could improve. I don't know if they've done the best. I think Diakite is a good signing, don't get me wrong. Maybe they could improve. But they kept Semenyo, which is huge. Clive, Evan Nielsen, key players in attack. Obviously, they lost Watara. Maybe they could have done a bit more business, but they're dangerous going forward. They've got a good manager. They're well coached. I don't see them finishing higher than 12th. You know, I think Bournemouth, Fulham, and Crystal Palace is all debatable. 1 minute I was putting Bournemouth 14th, Palace 13th, Fulham 12th. The next minute I was putting Palace 12th because that is their favourite position. Bournemouth 13th, Fulham 14th. I don't think there's much in those 3 teams. I think Bournemouth had that like, Semenyo, he's mint. And Palace had that, Wharton, he's, gay. And Fulham had that all-round stability. Like, I feel like on paper, Palace and Bournemouth might have some better players than Fulham, but I think in terms of stability and an all-round level, Fulham are there. So, yeah. Yeah, 11th is Forest. I can feel Forest fans disliking it. I can feel Forest fans not liking me for this, but you just got battered 3-0 by West Ham. Nuno is a manager that gets found out often in his later seasons, and there's already tension with ownership. And if Nuno goes, who replaces him? Like, could there, how are you going to deal with the demands of being in Europe, the extra games, the depth as injuries set in? Like, I look at Elliot Anderson. Wow, he's a baller. Started the season well. Keeping Gibbs White is big. Murillo and Milenkovic is one of the best centre-back pairings in the Premier League. Chris Wood is already scoring. But last year, Nottingham Forest overperformed their XG and the underlying numbers and their metrics more than any other team in the league. Look, it's not all about XG, it's not all about numbers, it's not all about metrics, I get that, but they massively overperformed a lot of their metrics in terms of what they create, in terms of sales making super saves, and I do think with Europe, and I do think as well, 40 million Amari Hutchinson, for me, he's not a 40 million player, but then I do look at Dan and Doy and think that's a really good addition, whereas Amari Hutchinson I think is a lower Premier League player, whereas Dan and Doy could be a higher Premier League player. In my opinion, I could be massively wrong about that. Look, they've got Elliot Anderson, they've got Morgan White, they've got Murillo, they've got Milenkovic, they've got Chris Wood, they've got some very good players. Don't get me wrong, when I'm looking at depth, I'm looking at they spent a lot of money, but, is that money they spent all wise? I like the signing of Ndoye the most, but how are they going to do with the Europa League? 3-0 to West Ham. Nuno sometimes gets found out in the second season. They did overperform their numbers last year. Look, it could be a fat out. I predicted Nottingham Forest to come 16th, 17th last year, and they came, 5th, 6th, 7th? I think they came 7th at the end. 7th is Everton. Now, I did predict that Everton were going to have a good season, but I think I predicted them 12th or 11th. I think I predicted they were going to have a good season. I thought the business that they'd done was good, and I think Everton, Moyes, good manager, you know what he can do. He improved them a lot at the back end of last season, but one thing about Everton was they lacked an attack, and I think what they've done in the window is gone and given themselves good attackers. Tyler Dibbling, Barry, Grealish, Drewsbury Hall, they look good in those opening games, Everton. They were unlucky maybe to not get result versus, at least to draw versus Leeds. They look good. They look like they could push top 8 under Moyes. You never know. I'm going to put them 10th because can they run out of steam? But we know Moyes is capable of getting West Ham, pushing for that top 6, getting West Ham in the Europa League. What he did with West Ham. We know that Grealish and Kieran Trippier have started well. We know Njai is a very good player, and I think he'll be better with better players around him. Dibbling, Barry, Kieran Trippier, Grealish. Like, I feel like Everton have always had a decent defensive stability, like Hosfy, Branthwaite, Pickford, but it's always been attack that's let them down, and they've solved their biggest issue. Going into 9th is Brighton, and again, I see so many people predicting Brighton like 5th and 6th, and I just don't see it personally. I like, Maxim de Kuiper signing. I like that Matt Weaver's looked quite good in that sort of fullback position this year. I think that Van Heck is one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League. I think Matoma is one of the best players in the Premier League. I think Baleba is one of the best players in the Premier League that I begged Man United to sign. but they haven't replaced João Pedro. Of course, they've got that young striker in from Greece, but he's 18. I didn't get Matt O'Reilly leading. I think there was more to see from Matt O'Reilly. Look, they have a lot of good players that we haven't seen a lot of yet. Like Rutter, I think, showed a little bit of glimpses towards the back end of last season. Don't get me wrong. I think Minter is actually in my Premier League. I expect him to have a big season this year. Sort of predictions. Like Minter's a player that I rate really highly. Like you look at Minter, you look at Rutter, you look at Matoma. I mean, Reef I think's got a lot more to offer. Baleba. I think that the Brighton have a very good squad, and I think they can finish higher than 9th. But I think they're unpredictable. They were very good versus Manchester City, but sometimes I watch Brighton and they don't look good. And sometimes I watch Brighton and they look really good. And I think there's an unpredictability there. So I've gone 9th. And maybe it's biased because I actually had Manchester United 9th and I put a save. I know you're thinking, Alice, you are crazy. How can you put Manchester United 8th? You drew to Fulham, you lost to Grimsby. Okay, we lost to Arsenal. We deserved a point out of that game versus Arsenal. You cannot convince me we didn't deserve a point. We drew to Fulham. We were unbelievable versus Fulham in that first half. The second half wasn't great, but look how many issues Fulham caused, title challengers Chelsea in that first half. Maybe this is copium, maybe this deluded positivity. Versus Burnley, we deserved to win. We should have been 4-0 at half-time, and we couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. My biggest issue with Man United is I can't put us higher than 8th because we didn't sign a midfielder, and our midfield is not good enough. And Ruben Amorim, really good first half versus Fulham. Fulham then adapt their game plan in the second half, go with a high press. We can't cope with it. The second half versus Fulham was abysmal. After 20 minutes, we could figure out what Fulham's game plan was, what they adapted, how they were playing, and Amorim didn't change the formation, the way we played out or anything. He just wanted to continue doing the same thing, thinking it would work, when Fulham massively changed their tactics in the second half. First half versus Burnley massively set off us. We were brilliant. We could have been 3-4 up versus Burnley at the first half. We were fantastic. Second half, Burnley pressed us a bit. We don't know how to deal with it. It became a chaos end-to-end game that we almost were lucky to win. Grimsby, that's an anomaly. It's a League Cup. I'm going to ignore it for now. But look, if it wasn't for goalkeeping errors, we could have got potentially 3 more points this season. And if I look at things like XG, Man United are first, above Chelsea. When I look at shots on target, we're second. When I look at shot create per 90, we're second. When I look at shot creating actions, we're first. Touching the position box, we're first. We've got the attackers in. We've got the quality in attack. It's about finishing our chances. 7th is Villa. Some people might argue this is too high after their start to the season. Now, they started this season badly. Don't get me wrong. But we saw that last season. Villa didn't start last season well. They picked up form in February time. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they did enough in the window. I think PSR impacted them. But Anada, Tielemans, Camara is one of the most elite midfielders of the Premier League. They're all top-level players. Unai Emery is a top-level manager. Cons is one of the most underrated centre-backs in the league. Watkins and Morgan Rogers are good players. Villa are good enough to get 7th. Even with European football, they're good enough to get 7th. I think they will invest in January if things go wrong. I just think that Villa will come 7th. I can't predict Man United higher. Maybe you could swap Villa and, maybe you can put Man United 9th, Villa 8th, Brighton 7th. I wouldn't be shocked if Brighton finished above Villa. But I still look at Villa's side and think it's solid. 6th is Tottenham. Very good opening 2 games. Very good cameo versus PSG despite not winning. Bournemouth game exposed they're not quite there yet. Feel like Thomas Frank is a signing short, a winger short, an attacker short as well. Look, 17th to 6th is a good jump. I don't think 6th is a bad finish for Tottenham. I think that's a good finish from Thomas Frank. When they've got to juggle midweek football in the UCL, 6th place from 17th is good. Van der Ven and Romero staying fit is key, but Danzo's a good depth option. Palhinha's shown he'll be really good in those big games, bring a bit of stability, help Tottenham in those big games. Thomas Frank has improved Tottenham a lot defensively. They're harder to beat, they're harder to break down. He's profiled players like Sarr incredibly well. He knows how to profile players. It's about Tottenham scoring goals. I said if Tottenham go 1-0 down and they've got to break a team down, they struggle. They didn't create anything versus Bournemouth, and that is their problem. They signed Xavi Simons, an incredible player, and Mohamed Kudus is in the door. 2 phenomenal signings. Colomwani coming in striker, I think it's a good option to compete with Richarlison and Solanke, and I do think Solanke's got a lot more to offer. But I think they could have done with one more signing. Like Odegaard, Johnson, Tell, good left-wing options, but had they signed a Semenyo, or had they got a creative player to go in that left, it could have been different. We know that they had the money for Savinho and Eze. They only got Xavi Simons. The Savinho money was never spent. Maybe they'll go big in January. I think Tottenham will look to invest in January, by the way. Kulusevski could come back second half of the season. Obviously, injuries with Kulusevski and Maddison are not ideal, but Thomas Frank's a good manager. He'll improve the Tottenham squad. Xavi Simons is a good signing. I think 6th is good. Now, this might surprise people, but Newcastle are staying in 5th. I know they're near the bottom of the table. I know they lost Alexander Isak. I know that most people are predicting them 8th, 9th, 7th. I'm predicting them 5th. I predicted Newcastle 5th last year. Watched so many predictions videos from other creators that predicted them 8th or 9th. I predicted them 5th last year. They finished 5th last year. I'm predicting them 5th again. They have a thing of surprising people. Everybody thinks, oh, they're not going to do well this season. Look, last time Newcastle in the Champions League, they had a bad season because of the injuries. But Newcastle already had a very good starting 11, and they needed to swap the 2 strikers in that starting 11, and they've brought in 2 good strikers in Visser and Voltemada, one proven, one young and technical. What they needed to do on top of that was improve their depth going into the Champions League. Ramsey's an improvement on depth. I think they could have had another midfielder in there for depth, but Ramsey's an improvement in depth. Chow was an improvement on depth. He could push the starting 11. So they've brought in players in Alanga, Ramsey, and Chow, which improve their depth, and they brought in 2 strikers to replace the 2 strikers that left. And they already have a very good starting 11. There was a point had they beat Arsenal second last game of the season, they could have finished second. They have a good manager, they have a good squad. Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes are elite players. You know, Botman, if he stays fit, is a very good player. Byrne is a good player. Shaw's an underrated player. I think Visser will be good. Voltemada is good. I think Alanga, Gordon, Murphy, Barnes is good wing options. Livramento, Hall, Trippier. I think Newcastle are a good side. Man City. I still have them in 4th, even though they've got 2 out of 3 losses. And maybe they do have a shot bad season again this year. But this season, Rodri's fit. They've signed Reinders, who is top, and he will be top. And Pep is Pep. He always finds a way around bad form. Whether that's he gets 200 million again in January, whether that's he adapts the system because he did adapt the system last year, he always finds a way. Oscar Bob is fit. He's promising. Savinho, Doku have a lot to bring. Foden should have a better season this year. Marmoush, Haaland, Reinders, Diaz, Rodri are all very good players, a very good core with a good manager. If Man City don't get top 4, I think that's a sackable offence from Pep Guardiola because I think they've got a good enough squad to get top 4. Some people are saying the wheels are going to fall off. This could be a bad season for City, but they'll still finish top 4. And look, how many times have City started seasons badly? People put pressure on Pep and they go and win the league. That's happened like twice. I remember the one season they had like a 5-3 defeat to Leicester. People were like, what's happening with Pep? And City caught up big time. City catch up big time. City always finish better than they start. Always under Pep. Who's 3rd? I think this team has looked very good. But it's Chelsea still. They've got a very good side, and I almost put them above Arsenal, but I don't think they've got the same defensive stability as Arsenal. And I think had Chelsea gone and signed Xavi Simons in the centre-back, I think Chelsea could have been second with the injuries Arsenal picking up. Chelsea have continuously finished higher and higher and higher each season. They know how to win things, which Arsenal haven't in recent years. So I can understand people put them higher. I think Garnacho will be good. Neto's improved a bit. João Pedro looks mint. Esteval's showing signs. The midfield depth of Caicedo, Enzo, Santos, Sugo, Lavia is insane. Not as reliant on Palmer now, who's a very good player, but they don't need Palmer to save them. Tosin, very underrated player, been very good for Chelsea lately. Chalobah, very underrated player, been good for Chelsea. So despite Colwell's injury, they have 2 good centre-backs. The question is depth, because Hato's more of a left-back. But I like young Josh. The question is depth at the back. Could they have signed a top centre-back? I think you can argue that. So that's why I put them 3rd. Second is Arsenal. Arsenal may have the best team in the league when it comes to depth. When it comes to 2 players for each position, I think they have the best team in the league. But injuries are already hitting them. And I still don't think they have the same attacking quality as Liverpool. So they're second for me. I think depth, overall squad, Arsenal have the most valuable squad in the league, probably the best squad in the league. But they're second to Liverpool for me. Because one, Arteta doesn't take enough risks as a manager. And I think sometimes you need those attacking risks to win games. But I also think Arsenal can win it, but they're starting to get injuries. I think out of possession defensively, Arsenal are the toughest team to break down. I think Arsenal could break the record for defensive record this season. I think they're so good defensively. I think Eze's a top signing. I think if you play to Gyökeres' strengths, he will succeed. Gyökeres and Havertz at striker. You've got Saka and Madueke at right wing, Eze, Martinelli and Trossard at left wing. That's really good options in attack. But it's not Isak, Ekitike, Gakpo, Salah, Wirtz level. Do you know what I mean? I just feel Liverpool haven't even played well in their first 3 games compared to what we know Liverpool can do. I think they've been all right, but we know Liverpool can be better. But they've won all of those games because they just have a different level of quality in attack there. I think Arsenal aren't good at playing badly and win. They did that versus Man United, but they're not quite good at taking that risk or having that moment in them that Liverpool do. And I think sometimes you can be a very good side, but sometimes you can draw a game because you can't find that moment to win it. And Liverpool always find that moment to win it. Which is why Liverpool is still number one. Despite missing out on Gay, I can see Liverpool, one, going back from in January. They've got Leone and Gomez to help them get through till then. Szoboszlai's looking unreal. Wirtz is only going to get better time. I think he will be good, Wirtz. Ekitike looks mint already. Isak's now coming in. Isak, Gakpo, Salah, Ekitike, Wirtz. Even if the defence isn't fully there, even if the midfield's been shaky and Liverpool concede two goals a game, they're capable of scoring 3-4 goals a game, which you can't say about Arsenal. Young Rio is looking good. Jones, McAllister, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai are all really good options in midfield that could be in the deeper role if need be. Trainer Ione's one that might even get an opportunity. So, yeah, if Liverpool start picking up injuries, they could be in trouble. If Van Dijk gets injured, look, I think it's Arsenal's year or Chelsea's year if Van Dijk gets injured. But I think Liverpool still win, sadly.